Welcome back. We are going to take you live to Ottawa now, where Deputy Prime Minister and the Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland, is speaking. Let's listen in.
I look forward to an important conversation about this with my counterparts from across the country on Friday. We promised to create the tax-free first home savings account in our 2022 budget, and we launched those accounts in April of this year. I was very glad to announce on October 5th, just earlier this month, that 150,000 Canadians had opened a first home savings account. And I am so happy to announce today, less than a month later, that number has climbed to more than 250,000 Canadians who have opened a tax-free first home savings account. Notre gouvernement sait que l'augmentation du
Our government knows that house prices are rising and that Canadians, particularly young Canadians, are having a harder time saving up so that they can put a down payment on a house. Housing is at the heart of our economic plan, and the first home savings account is an essential element of our housing plan. The first home savings account will enable Canadians to save up to $40,000 to buy their first home.
6 days ago, 100,000 more Canadians are saving up for their first home tax-free. This enthusiasm for the tax-free first home savings account shows that the dream and the reality of first home ownership is alive and well in Canada. And through our economic plan, our federal government is going to continue to build more homes faster for Canadians from coast to coast to coast. In the past few weeks, we have taken real, concrete action to continue leading the way in addressing Canada's housing challenge. Je vous remercie et je vais maintenant.
Thank you very much. And now over to Minister Fraser.
Merci, Chrystia. Merci tout le monde. Merci pour des questions juste avant le petit discours. Folks, we're making serious progress when it comes to the housing policies that we are adopting. And sorry, just apologies. Is there a microphone on in the room? I'm getting a lot of feedback. Okay, is it coming through okay for you? Okay, I'll continue. Despite the progress we're seeing as a result of the GST cut, as a result of the Canada Mortgage Bond, as a result of the Housing Accelerator Fund, we know there's a lot more to do. But I do have a lot of optimism as a result of some of the deals that we've been able to conclude, as well as the movement we're seeing from municipalities right across the country when it comes to actually changing the way that they build homes. To date, we have signed agreements with London, Halifax, Brampton, Hamilton, Vaughan, and Kelowna. The combined impact of these 6 agreements is going to see more than 13,000 homes built in those cities over the next 3 years. And in those cities alone, the projections are that nearly 110,000 homes will be built as a result of the changes that they're making. The kinds of changes that we're seeing cities adopt allow for more density. They are making it legal to build more homes in neighborhoods that previously did not allow for the kind of density that's going to create more space for people to live in their respective cities. What's very exciting, although 6 deals is a good start, given that this has been in motion only for about 6 weeks, we are seeing extraordinary movement in cities like Calgary, Edmonton, Kitchener, Moncton. Obviously, nous avons conclu une entente avec le Québec, avec les détails dont l'avenir très vite. Mais nous avons des opportunités pour continuer notre travail et collaborer avec la municipalité avec la plus grande ambition pour construire du logement pour tous les Canadiens. In addition to the Housing Accelerator Fund and the excellent news the Minister Freeland has just shared with now 250,000 Canadians, disproportionately young Canadians, who are saving up to buy their first home through the First Home Savings Account, we will be launching a new initiative this week. The Housing Supply Challenge is an initiative that was previously funded and had several rounds play out. Later this week, we are going to be launching the 5th round of the Housing Supply Challenge. This program invites citizens, stakeholders, and experts to propose solutions that are going to help increase Canada's housing supply. The range of different kinds of activities that we will be looking at in this round are going to focus on how industry can propose to create more efficient and cost-effective housing production system. What do I mean by housing production system? Every aspect of the process to get homes built will be included, from conceptualization to design to financing to approvals to construction to operations. We're also going to have a specific carve-out for nonprofit actors focused on community housing. This program is designed to generate ideas that will have a systems-level approach. It's not so much about the individual successful recipients who will receive funding to implement an idea, but it's to demonstrate new ideas that could be applied at scale to help address the housing crisis more fully. During previous rounds, the kinds of projects that we've seen go ahead include additional productive ability for additional dwelling units that are leading to new prefabricated homes that are smaller than a typical single detached home, but can exist on the same property with a 30-day production turnaround at a cost for $75,000 per unit to actually manufacture these kinds of homes. We've also seen new modular design that is led by Indigenous communities that is respecting traditional design elements, but building in modern sustainability and accessibility components to the construction. We've seen further awards made under previous rounds that have resulted in certain companies leading the way when it comes to standardized production for mass timber homes. And we've collaborated previously with academic institutions to have them develop a kit of parts, so to speak, that's designed to offer homes that are prefabricated that are tied to meet local building codes. These are the kinds of ideas that we are generating through the Housing Supply Challenge, and we'll have more details on the rollout of this program later this week. Thank you very much. C'est un plaisir d'être
All right,
ici.
so federal officials announcing housing affordability measures in Ottawa this hour.
We take you live now to Ottawa, where federal ministers are addressing affordability measures.
Per reporter in the room. If we can get through a single round and go to a second one, that's wonderful. So we will now turn over to tricks and treats, questions. And we'll begin with Mylène.
Bonjour, ma question est pour la ministre.
Thank you. My question is for Minister Freeland. Don't you think that the exemption for heating oil is a way of diluting your policy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? No. Question. That was a very short answer. Could you elaborate? Answer. Absolutely not. We did it to have an effective and pragmatic policy to reduce emissions. Heating oil is a very specific case because emissions from heating oil are very high, and it's also very expensive. And it is generally people in rural areas who are lower income who use it. So it just makes sense to create a program like the one we have created to help those people switch away from a heating system that uses heating oil to a more environmentally friendly one, and also a system that costs less. But the people who use those systems don't necessarily have the money to do that today or to do it quickly. So we now have a program that will enable those people to make the transition more quickly. That's the logic behind it.
Hi, Minister Freeland. There were some reports about a concept paper from the Israeli government suggesting that residents in Gaza would be transferred to Egypt, with some of them potentially being resettled in Canada. Did Israel make you aware of this proposal? And in general, is Canada open to accepting Palestinian refugees? I'm unaware of those reports.
Valérie.
I have a question for you, Minister Freeland. We are being told that within Cabinet you pushed for the exemption on the carbon pricing costs on heating oil. And now we've seen the Premier of Saskatchewan threatening to not send the revenue from the tax to Ottawa. And there are also premiers in other provinces who aren't happy with the situation. Do you think it really was the best solution that you found, since it's creating another problem? Answer. I cannot talk about the discussions that take place in Cabinet, so I will not talk about that. I just explained the logic, the very practical logic behind the program, and that really is based on what people are experiencing in real life. That is what motivated our decision. I would like to stress the fact that the program that we set up for the transition away from heating oil to a cleaner system for house heating is a program that's open to all provinces and territories.
Hi, Minister Freeland. Brian Platt from Bloomberg. You were in Washington recently. It looks likely the Prime Minister will be there later this week. The biggest irritant between the two countries still is your plan for a digital services tax. Can you give us an update on where that's at? Are you still confident you can reach a deal on this, or do you still intend to bring one in at the start of next year?
I was in Washington last week, and we did have some good conversations about the DST, including at officials level. I remain cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to reach an understanding with our American partners.
Hi, Mr. Freeland. Yesterday, Premier Ford and Mayor Chow wrote you a letter asking the federal government to join their working group focused on addressing Toronto's financial situation. Just wondering what your response was and what role you see for the federal government in helping Toronto, given you rejected Mayor Chow's request for financial assistance earlier this year.
We agreed to join the working group, and the Deputy Minister of Finance, Chris Forbes, will be joining that group.
We're so efficient today, guys. Greg.
I tried. I know we have limited time.
Greg.
Greg Quinn, Market News International. Mr. Freeland, I believe Bank of Canada Governor Macklem is saying that spending across all levels of government is starting to make his inflation fight a bit harder. How do you balance this in your fiscal plans against any obligations you might have under the Liberal Party's supply and confidence agreement with the NDP?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I reviewed the governor's remarks carefully, and indeed, I talked to him pretty often. He pointed out that over the past year, fiscal policy has not gotten in the way of monetary policy. I was glad to hear him observe that. We've been very conscious of that and very mindful of that. He did talk about the need for fiscal policy of all levels of government not to get in the way of monetary policy going forward. I am mindful of that also. And I will also point out, as the governor pointed out, that Canada has the lowest deficit in the G7. We have had the fastest rate of fiscal consolidation from the COVID peak in the G7, and we have the lowest debt to GDP ratio.
And I'll just add to that in terms of fiscal policy, we are very concerned with ensuring that our spending is focused on our government's top priorities. That is why the Minister of Finance placed in the budget 2023 the necessity for me as President of the Treasury Board to undertake a spending review. I will be tabling the results in its first iteration of that spending review in November in the supplementary estimates, and then again in the main estimates in the first quarter of next year. All that to say that ministers across our government are submitting proposals to me, and all of those proposals are their effort in their respective departments to ensure that we do not have wasteful spending and that our spending is actually directed to our government's priorities, the top of which is affordability for Canadians. Through this spending review, we will be refocusing $15 billion of spending over 5 years and $4 billion each year thereafter. And I think that is an important lens in which to examine the relationship between fiscal and monetary policy.
Yeah, I agree.
In parliamentary parlance, I see the clock at 8 minutes after 2, so if Minister Anand, I understand you might need to leave.
I will.
Okay. Anyway, we'll continue down our list. Our next question is from Mia Rabson, Canadian Press.
I'm just wondering if the issue with home heating oil mostly is the cost of the oil itself, and we've acknowledged that home heating oil is worse for the environment than other sources. Why is taking the carbon price itself off home heating oil the answer to the affordability issue? And are you not just undermining your carbon policy overall, particularly when you now have even premiers like in Saskatchewan saying they're just going to stop paying it?
No, we're not undermining the policy overall. Home heating oil has some very specific characteristics. Home heating oil is a very polluting form of heating oil. Home heating oil also is really expensive, and home heating oil tends to be used by low-income and rural people. And when you take those three characteristics together, it makes a lot of sense to do what the Prime Minister announced last week, which is to create a program that will accelerate the transition from home heating oil to heat pumps, to create a program that will allow people who are using home heating oil, who are paying a lot for that heavily polluting form of oil, but who just don't have the money to buy a heat pump right now, to make it possible for them to make a change that is going to be good for them, good for their family budgets, and good for the planet. But people can't make that change if they don't have the money to do it. And that is what we recognize. That is what we heard across the country. And that is why we've put that program in place. This is going to accelerate the transition and going to make life more affordable for Canadians. It's the right thing to do. And I do want to emphasize that the top-up to the heat pump program is available to any province that wants to participate.
David Thurton, CBC.
Hi, Mr. Freeland. You said that you watched Macklin's comments yesterday at committee. I'm wondering what you think about what he had to say about whether or not the carbon price is fueling inflation. And Conservatives, their takeaway from that was that it's contributing as much as 16% to inflation. So is the carbon price fueling inflation?
I said I read his comments carefully. When it comes to the carbon price, I think the verdict of economists in Canada and around the world is absolutely clear. And the verdict is that this is the most efficient way to address climate change. It is the most efficient way to reduce emissions. That's something that the IMF has pointed out. The IMF has very explicitly commended Canada's price on pollution as a model for countries around the world. And just a couple of days ago, the chief economist of the IMF, or maybe her name is the deputy managing director. Anyway, the number 2 at the IMF wrote a piece in the Financial Times talking about how governments needed to use a price on pollution as a way to fight climate change. One of the arguments she used there, which I very much agree with, is we are at a time when, as a country and countries around the world, need to act urgently to address climate change. That is an economic necessity. We need to do it if we want to have the jobs and the industries of the future here in Canada. At the same time, we are operating in a world of fiscal constraints. And that is one of many reasons that a price on pollution, which is the most efficient way to reduce emissions, makes a lot of sense. And that is why Canada's price on pollution is admired around the world.
Kyle?
Minister, I'm wondering if you have a date for the fall economic statement yet. When is that coming? It is the fall.
I announced a meeting that I'm hosting on Friday, but that is the only date I'm announcing today.
So not Friday. When are you going to tell us?
I'm not announcing that either.
We have time for a question online, so we're going to go to Paul Vieira. I'm going to unmute you now, Paul. Just a reminder that it's just one question. Go ahead. I think you're unmuted.
Minister, the opposition parties have called on you to block the RBC HSBC deal. Will you heed that request? And what time frame are you looking at in delivering a verdict?
Thanks for the question, Paul. There are very clear rules set out in Canada governing transactions of this sort. And there are clear rules about the institutional input into decisions made about those transactions. We are a rule of law country and a government that believes in supporting our foundational institutions. So we will be following those rules carefully. Given that this is a transaction which is still under review, I'm not going to say anything specific further.
You've been listening in to federal ministers in Ottawa answering questions around affordability measures, mainly around the exemption of heating oil from the carbon tax.